And what you're telling me is you're going to tell me what to eat.
Well, some helpful food.
What about supplements? Give me a supplement I should take. I can tell you're not going to give me that. All right.
I'm not. That's the whole thing about the matrix is
Oh, the
finding
Matrix.
out it isn't good enough just to take the essential nutrients, put them in a pill and take it that way. It leaves you far short of your optimal health and performance than if you have the whole nutrient dense matrix of food.
This is why she's on the podcast. She's going to tell us about dairy matrix. Hello, everybody. This is the Dairy Digressions podcast. I am Dr. Matt Lucy, and I will be your host. We're recording from the 2024 American Dairy Science Association annual meeting in West Palm Beach, Florida. This annual gathering advances scientific collaboration and learning and also reinforces our personal and professional ties in the dairy sciences. Hey, if you missed this meeting, it's not too late to get on board for the next meeting, which will be held in Louisville, Kentucky, June 22nd to 25th, 2025. And look out for more episodes from the top minds and innovators at this year's gathering. Today in the podcast, we have Professor Connie Weaver, a distinguished research professor in the School of Exercise Physiology and Nutritional Sciences College of Health and Human Services at San Diego State University. Connie studies diet interventions in animal models and humans and performs randomized controlled trials in children and adults with health and disease reduction outcomes. She is a fellow of the American Society of Nutrition, a fellow of the American Society of Bone and Mineral Research, a fellow of the American Heart Association, and a fellow of the Institute of Food Technologists. She has a BS and MS from Oregon State University and a PhD from Florida State. I am a gator. This is not good already. Amazingly, she has 490 publications, nearly 28,000 citations, an H-index of 76, and has been a member of the National Academy of Sciences since 2010. We are tremendously happy to have you here. Hello, Connie.
Hello, how are you?
That is unbelievable. How did you like write 490 papers? Your hand must be tired.
I've been in the business a while.
It helps to stay in the business.
It does.
Wow, that is phenomenal. And a member of the National Academy
of Medicine, right?
Of Medicine. That is phenomenal. Are there many women members in that? I'm wondering.
Well, they're growing.
They're growing.
Women and minorities have been really growing because it used to be nicknamed the Pale Ale Stale Club. And so they went on a mission to diversify.
Oh, so that is it's such an honor. And when I saw that, we don't know each other. Can we agree to that? We do not know each other. We met each other today. So this is all for real. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm just going to check this lady out in Scopus. And I'm like, whoa. Okay, I got to get serious now. So I'm assuming you're born in Oregon.
I was.
Okay, because you went to Oregon State. And okay, you were growing up in Oregon, some small town in Oregon, right? And
correct.
You said, I'm gonna be a scientist. Is this what happened?
Pretty much. I knew I wanted to be a scientist from third grade. I'm a bit unusual that way.
Oh, you enjoyed it. You're curious then.
Very.
And your parents supported that idea?
They supported education.
And what was your undergraduate major?
Foods and nutrition.
No way.
I did. I'm pretty
plain wrong, okay? Foods and nutrition.
And I knew I wanted to be a professor from freshman in high school.
What?
So yeah, that's unusual, isn't it?
Foods and nutrition?
Well, I was in 4-H. My mother was the 4-H leader.
Okay.
And in my family, it was a lot about food. We had a huge garden. We hunted, fished, basically produced every bit of food that we ate. We'd go to the store for flour and spices, basically. Okay. Otherwise, we produced. My mother and I would process 2,000 units of food a summer.
So you were fascinated by food and
correct.
Minimal processing of food and locally sourced for sure.
Well, that's how I grew up, but the modern convenience of transportation allows me to have foods that I can't grow all year round
Out of
anywhere I am.
season. I thought about that because my wife and I just purchased 10 acres, and I thought we're really good at growing potatoes. So first of all, 10 acres is a tremendous amount of land in terms of food production for two people.
That's right.
Yeah, and I don't know how many acres you guys had, but it's a that must have been quite a task, an exciting task. And any interest in doing that now in the city of San Diego?
So I still have some herbs and
Oh yeah.
tomatoes and a few things, spinach.
Yeah, spinach is
But
wonderful.
actually, now that I'm in San Diego for the last 2 years, we have citrus trees in our backyard.
Oh, nice.
And that's an exciting new change.
Yeah. Oh, so San Diego is very different. You said, so first of all, you were in food science and nutrition as an undergraduate. How you found that on the book, I don't know. I mean, like, Billy, you're going for all the majors and your finger stops at food science and nutrition.
Rach had a lot to do with
Okay,
my
so
interest. I knew I liked all kinds of science.
Yeah.
And the beauty about food science and nutrition is they use all the sciences.
Right.
I didn't have to select physics or microbiology. I could use it all.
Today, I was at your seminar, and we're going to get to your seminar on the dairy matrix, but your enthusiasm for science, I can tell you, has not waned any, okay, over the years. I mean, it just kind of comes through. And it's interesting, we had a symposium yesterday for a recently deceased member of our community, and the word enthusiasm came through so much, how important that is in science, right? That we're enthusiastic about. It's too hard if you're not enthusiastic, isn't it?
It is. And I'll tell you, an early discovery I made on that point is you have to be enthusiastic and excited by little things, and not just like the end of the whole project, but every little accomplishment, the solution turned out correctly, or the order came in, or
the order came in. Yeah, I know that.
Whole thing you have to be happy and surprised about, because otherwise it's a very long haul from the beginning to the end of a whole project to have it all done.
Yeah, that's interesting. We haven't had many people say that. You need to celebrate the little things because they're all in a movement towards a bigger thing. So I know you mentioned that you are currently at San Diego State as I don't know, some sort of, the title was Distinguished Research Professor.
Right.
Okay. But then you're telling me you were at Purdue.
Correct. For like 40 years.
Oh no. And you did that to your mother? Your mother's out in Oregon and you moved to Purdue, and she never forgave you, right?
She would have agreed with you on that point. But they supported me all the way through wherever I ended up. And we tried to visit each other, of course, but
it's a long way from home.
Yeah. And now I've done the reverse. I've moved to San Diego when 2 of our children live in Indianapolis.
Oh no.
Where I moved from.
I grew up in New York, and I moved out to, I work in Missouri now. And so, and it's where you go, right? You end up someplace.
Right.
You end up someplace. So when you're at Purdue, you mentioned you were department head. Did you have when you were at Purdue, okay, so you said you were at Purdue for 40 years, and 20 years you're department chair of nutritional sciences.
Correct. 25 years, right?
25 years as department chair of nutritional sciences. And when you were not department chair, or maybe when you were was it a research teaching split or what?
It was all the missions of a land-grant university: teaching, research, outreach.
The whole thing.
Plus administration. Yeah, I had a big lab. And
how did you work that? So a lot of times, these days when we have a department chair, for example, they give up basically everything and just do the administration stuff. It sounds, obviously with 490 publications, you did not give up everything.
No, I had a big research group and ran centers. Well, a couple of things. I've got a lot of energy.
Right. Yeah.
You mentioned that. But also I hired really amazing people that helped me with everything.
Right.
Running the department and in the laboratory, running centers. I couldn't be more grateful to all the support people. It takes a village.
Right. And that team you assemble is so critical, right?
And one thing that, so 80 of my funding or more was from NIH for that whole time. And I would get marveled at by program officers and whatnot saying, I kept the same basic team together over several decades. And I go, that's unheard of.
Right, it
And
is.
that really helped cement the productivity and the efficiency. And
so you must have had, you had your own team. Did you have other people at Purdue that you collaborated with, other faculty that you would work with on these projects?
Not only at Purdue, but everything I got into was interinstitutional, interdisciplinary.
Right.
I was into systems biology before it was a thing.
Before it was cool, right?
Right.
It's interesting because I think now, perhaps not early in your career, but now it's so clear that you just can't get funded, or you can't really do effective science unless you assemble a team of people who have different expertise, right?
That's true. The questions are too complicated and too big compared to earlier where you were working with one compound or one small system.
Yeah.
It's more complex now.
What do you look for in a team member? So you said you worked across you had choices. You didn't have to work with everybody. What were you looking for in assembling your team across the institution?
Well, partly it's complementary expertise, but a lot more, I think, is can you trust them to deliver and be there pulling their weight? So if that didn't happen, they probably weren't part of the next round.
And then you have to assemble a big team, but you find out that there are good collaborators and maybe not as good collaborators. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about this trust and willingness to work together.
Yes.
I'm working with a team across institutions now, putting together this big program project type grant to NIH. And some of the people are new. And I was a little bit worried, how would the different perspectives come together? So it never stops worrying. And it's just delightful when we get on a Zoom call and they have the attitude, oh, I can learn from you. And I don't mind giving up this previous idea I had for the betterment of the whole project and answer the question. And then I'm just thrilled with the new team.
It's, when I put together this team for this NIH grant, it was just so exciting. It's the same experience. I don't have to learn everything about microbiology. I can have a microbiologist who has interest in this project, and it's way more fun.
It is.
Because you're like learning.
It is.
And
so you have to have a little bit of humility to think you can learn from another person.
So the assembly of teams, it's interesting. It's a thing that it's interesting. We have a lot of younger listeners on this podcast. And I think that's an important message that we're touching upon right now is that's something you need to learn how to do, and you have to be open to doing. You have to not only have your interests, but you have to be part of other people's interests. And this trust aspect is so important.
It is.
Okay, you need to be able to deliver.
And another piece of advice is don't be afraid to ask questions and admit what you don't know. You're not going to learn very much if you don't put out there what you don't know and what you'd like to know more about.
It's that humility that's critical, right? And so you must have had lots of postdocs, lots of trainees, any overriding philosophy for training postdocs, but it can be both. Let's say trainees. We don't have to break it down to grad students and everything. Any overriding philosophies that you had or used?
So support them every way that you can and expect them to support you in the project in return so that you're excited together. I think years ago, I read this interesting article, Chemical Engineering News or something like that. And it said at the time, women and men had very different approaches to mentoring people. The women would nurture and the men would set up a competition.
Yeah, that's the idea. I like it.
give a same problem to two different people and see who could come up with solutions the fastest.
Right.
I'm definitely on the men read side, but I think more men are too now.
Yeah. It's well, the students are different and everybody maybe approaches it a little bit differently. I mean, I think it's just I think what you said is it's just important to care. You have to care. You have to care. They're people and they're young people. And young people have challenges, in the lab and outside the lab, and I think that's one thing. I remember when I started mentoring students, I thought everyone was like me. And I realized no one's like me. But if they come together and as long as they bring different elements, it works,
But it takes some investment to sustain relationships over the long time.
Yes.
Like every year at the annual nutrition meeting, I have a reunion of former trainees.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Must be a tremendous number of people there then.
Well, it varies who goes from year to year,
Right,
but
right.
even that just touching base, it
Right.
often leads to emails back and forth. Oh, how are you doing?
Right. It's important,
Haven't
right?
seen you for a while, that kind of thing.
So I see you mentioned that you are putting together a large program project grant, it sounds like. And I was going to ask you the question, what's a number one question in foods right now? But that must be addressing an important question so what is your program project grant addressing, or what are you trying to get at?
Well, it's looking at about how diet can protect against a musculoskeletal health decline with aging.
Thank goodness somebody's working on aging. The older we get, the more interested we're in aging, right?
That's right. I spent almost all my earlier career with adolescents, and now more and more with the other
aging
end of life. Yeah,
the aging population, and I teach endocrinology, so I'm super interested in sort of changes in the endocrine system as we age and how they relate to muscle mass and stuff like that.
And women get that big blow of loss of estrogen with menopause.
And it's a great question, right? So the nutritional aspects of this.
It is.
How do we eat for a healthier musculoskeletal system?
We can't grow it as much as protect against loss. So we're desperately holding on to our bones and our muscles to prevent them slipping away. And we've been working on bone for a lot longer than muscle. Sarcopenia is kind of a new concept to people, and worrying about physical inactivity and the loss of muscle, and the data are just astounding how fast you can lose muscle with inactivity.
I'm telling you. Now, let me just tell you something, Connie. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And so I've been doing triathlons my whole life.
Oh my, yeah, I'm impressed.
I'm impressed. And that's the thing, is the older you get, it's like if you just see it, because when you're doing triathlons, you do a lot of weightlifting. It's a lot of quantitative stuff.
Yeah.
And what you find is you really need to keep after it because you lose the muscle mass so quickly.
That's right.
That's what you're saying.
That's right.
And what you're telling me is you're going to tell me what to eat.
Well, some helpful food.
What about supplements? Give me a supplement I should take. I can tell you're not going to give me that. All right.
I'm not. That's the whole thing about the matrix, is finding out it isn't good enough just to take the essential nutrients, put them in a pill and take it that way. It leaves you far short of your optimal health and performance than if you have the whole nutrient dense matrix of food.
This is why she's on the podcast. She's going to tell us about dairy matrix. So you're telling me, I thought on Star Trek they just ate little pills and stuff and it was all good. Didn't Bones give them some pills and they were good?
That's what they thought. And at that same time, that's basically what the public was told and thought, is now we know the whole array of essential nutrients. We'll just put it in a pill.
Yes.
And you can get it. And so that's led us to really faulty thinking, like, okay, you don't need milk. You just take a calcium supplement.
Right.
And how inferior that is for developing bones, having a diverse gut microbiome, for example, and protecting against musculoskeletal decline and aging.
It's absolutely true. So I really think that I want to discuss a little bit about your research, and then we're going to talk about the dairy matrix, because It's just so important. And I also want you to encourage you to publish a paper with us. And this is in the Journal of Dairy Science. Okay.
It sounds like a good fit for some of my work.
You're a dairy person. It has dairy in the word, and you're so famous. We would love to have something. And the Journal of Dairy Science, we also have a new loyalty program. So the more you publish, right, the less the fees are. And if you review for us, it's even better.
Okay.
So when you see something from the journal, you get more rewards. We have a very good journal, but it's really applied.
Oh, I've read a lot of papers from there.
Yeah, it's an excellent journal. And we're very, we know that the food papers, particularly if they have anything to do with human health, they're highly cited. They are really hot because that's what everybody wants.
People care about their health.
They do care about their health. I thought that I saw a paper. I know you're super interested in calcium, and we're going to talk about two things that you talked about relative to the dairy matrix. And I know your passion is calcium. And what was so interesting about your presentation was that, well, first of all, let's talk about why is calcium important to women? Let's just start there. Okay. Because I think you wrote a paper recently, just published. It was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and it was an editorial piece, Next Generation Health Benefits of Maternal Calcium. So this would actually be pregnant women and the importance of calcium. So why is calcium important for pregnant women?
Well, let's back off from just that one group and say more generally how calcium is important to bone. So calcium is the dominant mineral in bone mineral matrix, and it's a constant fraction of bone. And I don't think people realize that enough. You don't just store calcium in a non-functional way. And it's the only nutrient where its storage is functional. So if you have more calcium in your body, that means it's in the bones, and that means you have more bone mass because it's a constant fraction. So if you start losing calcium in your bones, it means you're losing all of bone because it stays as a constant fraction. You're just not leaching a little calcium out. You're leaching the whole bone to get the calcium. So your body has to have a certain amount, a constant amount in the blood to nourish all your tissues, because calcium is critical for survival. So it's a biological priority to have that constant level in your blood. So if you don't get calcium in your diet, you're going to rob your bones to provide it in your blood, or you die.
I never thought about that the bone is kind of,
It's a bank.
It's a calcium bank.
It's a calcium, and to an extent, magnesium and phosphorus and other mineral micronutrient bank. But calcium is the dominant one, and it's the most likely to be deficient in the diet because too few people consume 3 equivalents of dairy servings a day.
See, I did not know this. I never thought about it that way. I'm like, bone is bone, and you just like, I got lots of bone.
I wish we could educate the populace on this concept. You have obligatory losses of calcium every day because there's an automatic turnover of bones to repair all your little micro fractures and whatnot. And we're not 100% efficient. So we lose some calcium in the urine every day, obligatory. You can't synthesize calcium. You have to have it coming in from the diet. So if you don't at least replace your losses, you're in a net loss of bone. And when you're in a growth period, like adolescence, like pregnancy, for the fetus, you have to have a net positive calcium balance going on, or somebody's suffering.
So the requirements for calcium are greater in the pregnant woman.
Well, that's an interesting question. Not exactly, because you absorb calcium very efficiently in your 3rd trimester.
No way. Come on, man. Now you're just telling stories.
No, you
really
like double your calcium absorption.
So the intestine
efficiency.
adapts to the pregnancy.
It does. And so
That's
you
cool.
really put it away during your 3rd trimester. But why I hesitated in answering your question It's really important for pregnant women to get enough calcium from their diet, and the average person is not. Not because they need more, but they need it really during that period. During growth periods is especially important.
So that would potentially influence probably not only the fetal bone deposition, but probably other aspects of fetal development.
Well, unless you're super deficient, the fetus is protected.
Right.
It's you that's going to be.
It's going to get you. So and so we're not going to.
With adolescent,
Yeah,
they're more efficient. Like they'll absorb calcium from a glass of milk at efficiency of 40%.
Yeah.
Whereas the equivalent non-pregnant adult will absorb it at 30%. So even though they're more efficient, you got to have it. You can be more efficient, but if your diet's so low, it can't correct a completely low calcium intake.
It's fascinating. And we're going to talk about calcium in a second. We're going to digress on iodine. Okay. Or is it iodine or iodide? Iodine?
Iodine.
Iodine. We're going to go iodine.
Okay.
And of course, you also wrote a paper on trends in iodine intake among girls and women. You seem to be focused on female nutrition. Is that because it's not a problem in men, or are you just focused on, for example, the aspect is of pregnancy, potential pregnancy?
Problems surface the most for pregnancy.
For pregnant women.
Right. And so it's, as I think you mentioned at the beginning, iodine is important for thyroid function.
Right. Yes.
And the main source in our diet is milk. So
Well, slow down now. I thought it was iodine salt. I get the salt with iodine in there.
Okay, the main natural source is milk.
But where does that come in? Why are the cows eating iodine? That's strange. Milk has iodine in it.
It does. And we've got a lot of problems. We're getting threatened as a society because of some changes in food habits. So one is we're telling them to lower salt intake. And as you just mentioned, we solved goiter by iodizing salt.
Yes.
And if we're saying lower your salt intake because of blood pressure, if you're really good at that, you've really lowered the iodine consumption. And they don't usually use iodized salt in food manufacturing because of the color problems with the iodine in there. So you can't count on salt added to processed foods.
And milk is an excellent source of iodine.
And milk is an excellent source of iodine. And people are switching away from consuming milk, whether it's to plant-based alternative beverages or something else, they're then not getting the iodine. So that's a new problem.
So I think what we're talking about today is we're talking a lot about pregnant women and the importance of nutrition. And we've talked about calcium and iodine. And we're going to shift away from iodine right now. But I think people need to understand that iodine deficiency in the pregnant woman leads to a syndrome, congenital hypothyroidism in the mom. And it's not great for the mom, but it's very bad for the fetus. It has significant implications for fetus on this. That's true. And I think that's why it's so critical. I think what you said was excellent, is that, nutrition really comes to the head in the pregnant woman. You're carrying, your child, and what you eat really is important for not only your own health, but for your unborn child's health.
And the editorial you mentioned talked about a study where it shows it can have generational effect.
Oh, goodness.
So like if you get enough calcium, you can not only influence your own bones, but subsequent generations can be protected.
Okay, so I will tell you where I came from. Okay, I was born in 1960. We always had to drink your milk.
You're a young thing.
You got to drink your milk. You got to drink your milk because it's got calcium. And, I was like, whatever. Okay. That just sounds like a sales pitch to me, And then today, so before we talk about your studies, but today you showed the data. Milk is it's packed with calcium. It's not even funny.
You really can't meet your calcium requirements without dairy unless you go to fortified or foods or supplements.
What?
I have
That's
studied.
not true now. Come on now. We're at a dairy science meeting. You got to tell the truth.
I am. So
You have to have dairy?
I've studied calcium absorption from virtually all the important sources.
Mhm.
So I used to, for 20 years, I grew plants hydroponically and put
This is
tracers
great. Yeah.
of
For your
calcium.
research. I thought to
For my
eat.
research. No, to put calcium tracers or other minerals that I do in the hydroponic solution. And so it would take them up and deposit it in the natural forms.
Mhm.
So I have dozens and dozens of paper on calcium absorption from all of these different plant foods compared to calcium from dairy products like milk. None of them have the concentration of calcium and the absorption efficiency to let you replace milk, not in a practical sense. So for example, you need 4.5 cups of broccoli to have the equivalent of the amount of absorbable calcium as 1 glass of milk or 1 cup of yogurt.
I am telling you, my wife makes me eat broccoli all the time. I'm going to send her this podcast. Okay,
but you can't replace 3 servings of dairy with any natural food. You just can't eat enough of it.
So how much? So the next time she lays the broccoli on me, I just got to get some milk, and I'm good. Is that what you're telling me?
Right. Sprinkle some cheese over it or something.
Put some cheese on it.
Or drink it with a glass of milk. Consume it with a glass of milk.
So the milk is unique, and what you're saying is very unique.
It's very concentrated and it's well absorbed.
Right.
Both.
And
so plants can have some well absorbed calcium, but the concentration is so low, it's not practical. You have to go to fortified foods like fortified orange juice, say, or fortified tofu, calcium set tofu. You can get 1 serving to equal a glass of milk, but you can't use natural diet without fortified foods or supplements.
Can you describe, you showed an experiment. I can't remember the endpoints, but you were comparing, I think you were feeding, it wasn't people, maybe it was laboratory animals, maybe it was people, milk versus calcium carbonate or calcium carbonate.
Right. So we did this rat study in growing rats where we raised them on either non-fat dry milk for the source of calcium or calcium carbonate. But we gave them all their essential required nutrients. It wasn't like they were deficient according to what their requirements are, but the bones of the rats on the non-fat dry milk were stronger, bigger, denser, resisted breaking strength better microarchitecture. It mattered. The dairy matrix mattered.
So it mattered that calcium came from milk as opposed to just a powder, essentially a chemical powder.
Right.
Because they couldn't absorb the chemical powder?
No, the calcium absorption was the same because we studied that in these rats. It wasn't the calcium. It was something else about the matrix, either some bioactive compounds or the chemical form, something else, not the calcium.
So for you young people, I know The Matrix is a movie, right? Is it Matrix is a movie? We're not talking about the movie. We're talking about the dairy matrix, okay? And we're here with Connie Weaver, who you wrote an article 2022 in Journal of Nutrition. Were you the one who coined the term the dairy matrix?
No.
Oh, darn.
No. So food matrix in general is a rather new area of research where they say it's not just the essential nutrients that you need that matters. It's how are they arranged? What are they bound to? What are the bioactives? What's the structure, the fiber, or everything? How does it all come together to make a difference? In lay terms, you could just boil it down. Does the whole food give you more health advantages than eating just vitamin and mineral supplements, say, that would have all the nutrients together? And it does over and over again. But the dairy matrix has been the most studied.
It's the most studied
of all the food matrix. But now there are calls for research grant submissions for the meat matrix and,
yeah, of course, the
different
meat matrix,
different other kinds of matrices and fruits and vegetables. They
Right.
have to decide or find out
right.
what is it about the whole food or the
Right.
food patterns that matter.
So I think the point is that if you took milk and you were able to isolate every single molecule from that milk and make a powder, that and fed the powder, every molecule was separated and fed every amino acid was separated, fed that powder. That's not milk.
It's not supporting the gut microbiome
Mhm.
for the optimal health, supporting bone growth
Mhm.
and other cardiovascular risk factors,
It's
not the
that
same.
complex
And appetite
Mhm.
control.
Mhm.
It's something more about the complexity.
of milk itself,
Mhm.
that fluid, that white fluid.
Or in some studies, it's the solid forms or the yogurt, like the semi-solid, or the cheese might do better. So it depends on what you're studying in the population, what does better, but it matters, it turns out.
Can you explain for our listeners, if I took some milk and put it on a microscope, it's like it has a lot of substructure to it. Is that fair?
Yes, yes, it's
like
very
some
complex.
elements of the substructure. You were talking about the milk fat globule, for example.
Right.
That has a structure.
It has a very complicated structure. It's not just oil droplets suspended around in water.
Right.
It's got this very sophisticated, complex, highly structured phospholipid layer around it when it's extruded from the cow. And there's a lot of research going on about that structure and looking to see what health benefits it has.
It's fascinating, isn't
It
it?
is.
It's really fascinating. And then what else is under the microscope? So you got all the milk fat globules, a lot of that, but you've got other sort of molecules floating around. So you have
proteins. Some of them are dissolved in the water, the whey proteins, and some form these complexes called the casein micelles, which are larger and they're suspended rather than dissolved. And that's a pretty unique protein arrangement in milk that you don't find in other systems. And it makes lovely products when you process it and they fall out of suspension. You get cheese and ice cream and so forth.
You know, I think one of the other speakers was talking about, the notion that this is the perfect food, milk. And I know we're at a dairy science meeting, so I know this is Dairy Digressions. Do you think it's the perfect food?
Well, it's the only food needed for your first 6 months. If you're talking about human milk, you don't need to introduce solids for most babies
for 6 months. That's kind of amazing, isn't it?
It is. It is deficient. It's low in iron and zinc. So after 6 months, you need to supplement human milk.
That's all you're missing is iron and zinc?
Well, that's all that we're told so far with our knowledge about. And then so you need to diversify eventually.
Really? But 6 months? Well, I tell you, with the pigs, okay. Now, we give them iron shots, but you know what we learned as animal scientists, you can either give them iron shots or you can just throw a bunch of soil in the pen and they dig it. There's enough iron in the soil.
Oh, I bet.
And so if you mothers out there are worried, just let the kid, dig around in the garden a little bit. They'll be okay. Or you got 6 months, nurse them and dig them around the garden. All right. Is that what you're saying?
That's hilarious.
One of the things we talked about is a plant-based alternatives. And I read your abstract that you wrote for this. And you said dairy foods are sustainable as well as nutrient dense and are more affordable than plant. Okay, so you were talking about the affordability. But the gentleman today, I don't know if it was your talk or somebody else, they said that soy is sort of close to milk, soy-based milk.
It's the closest in terms of having similar amounts of good quality protein. It has more potassium and some of the micronutrients than the other plant-based beverages, but it doesn't have any iodine.
Oh, it does not. Okay. So in the other ones, other than the soy, the other ones are just not even close.
They're a lot lower in protein content and quality.
Okay.
Some are lower in potassium and magnesium probably, but certainly zero in iodine.
I get a lot of questions from students, hey, there's hormones in milk and they're going to hurt me. And as you know, I'm sure you're well aware, there's a lot of micronutrients in milk that we don't even study, stuff we might know it's there, but we don't understand its implications. And there are, mothers have hormones in them, and some of those hormones end up in milk. Does anybody ever study those, or they're not dangerous, but people ask about them?
So there are small amounts of growth factor hormones in milk, and higher levels of growth factors has shown cancer risk in laboratory animals. But the amounts in milk are pretty small to be worried about that.
Yeah, they're tiny, and they are they're coming from your mother, or to you. I always tell people, I don't know, how many years have we had mammals? Is it 200 million?
Something.
I don't think 200 million years of mammalian evolution are going to lead to a toxic substance. I'm sorry. I don't think it's happening. Okay.
That's not our primary thing to worry about.
Right. We got other things to worry about. Is it 200? I got to look that up. I can't remember. So I'm going to ask you a few final questions here. You've been phenomenal, of course, but I'm going to ask you a question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Can you handle it?
I'll try.
I'll try. As a woman in science, what was it like when you started? You must have started as an assistant professor.
I did. So I started when I was 28 years old, and I came pregnant. And I'll tell you what it was like then, many years ago, is if I had to go to an appointment with the doctor, which you do when you're pregnant, I was advised, and it was pretty obvious, I would not dare say, I have to go see my OBGYN appointment. And even when I had children, so I had 3 kids within 20 months. I had.
Oh, time out. I got to do some math here. That's not possible. Oh, yeah, twins. The human gestation doesn't allow that.
I had a son, and 20 months later, I had twins.
Oh, my.
So I had them during the time I was getting tenure. So there's a lot of appointments with maternity and then the children.
Yeah.
And I didn't dare say I was going off for an appointment like that. I would say I have an meeting or an appointment off campus or something like that, because I was warned you would be viewed unfavorably during tenure meetings if you were prioritizing your personal life. And when I did get tenure and had those 3 kids, the first thing my female dean said to me was, we were all betting you couldn't do it.
Oh, no. Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah,
thank you for that. Yeah.
But the time I was department head, I was celebrating with pictures in our newsletters about my pregnant assistant professor.
Yeah, they were having children.
Yeah. It was a completely changed environment.
Do you think it's one reason we don't have women going into faculty positions, because they have conflicted priorities with maybe becoming moms, and they're not sure it's going to work for them? Do you think that's a consideration, or is it something else? Why?
I think for both parents worried about financial security for their families, it affects their careers, like going to industry versus academia. Housing is a real problem for parents, the affordability of housing that wasn't true when I was raising my children. And I think that's forcing career decisions as much as anything. But I just watched the movie on TV about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life.
Yes.
And I would say after watching that, I think we're not where we need to be yet. There's huge advances from when I started in my career for women, but it's not too hard to find where people aren't really viewed completely equitably still.
So there's still work to do in your mind.
There's still work to do.
Yeah, I think, and even in our scientific communities, there's a lot, I'm a big reader of Science and Nature. I love to read Science and Nature. And I always love to read about professional development, the things in women, and even amongst our scientific meetings, there's work to do, just in terms of making it so people with families can actually participate.
And another big thing is just credibility of science. I think that's a big obstacle we fight today is the public believing the science.
It's interesting, right?
Yes.
It's like the gentleman was talking about in the last talk, just sort of like, how did we get to the point where milk was bad for you? How did we ever get to the point where milk was bad for you, right?
When faith or emotion plays equal weight to science in much of the public's eye,
Yeah.
that just wasn't true for most of my career.
You're right.
And it's sad.
Science is so important, and I get so passionate about it, just passionate about science. It's the greatest career ever.
Well, we're bonded on that.
Yeah, it's the greatest career ever. So you love science, but if you were not a scientist, what would you be doing?
Oh, a different kind of science.
No, you can't say that.
Well, I love the outdoors too.
Oh, fantastic.
But what I really like is mixing it up, having adventures along with science. So
Right.
adventures in the science
Right.
and adventures outside of the science.
So you would be an outdoors
Mm-hmm.
kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
You love the outdoors.
And I fit it in now, but I would fit it in more full time.
Yeah, I think that's one thing about science. It's a great career.
It is.
If you love to travel,
It is.
if you love meeting people that are passionate, it's a fantastic career.
It is.
And we still have work to do to support both young men and young women going into science,
Mhm.
because both genders are sort of like, I don't know if I can do that, but I hope you can do it. Got to work hard.
Right.
You got to work hard.
Right.
It's science,
but it's worth it.
But it's worth it. Well, Connie, I think you've been fantastic. We never met before, and as always, you've been a blast. And I saw your presentation. I said, this one's going to be a blast. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, that brings us to the end of this episode of Dairy Digressions. Don't forget, if you enjoyed Dairy Digressions, please like and subscribe. And if you have feedback or suggestions for speakers, please let us know at adsa@adsa.org. This is Matt Lucy, your host. Until next time, enjoy your science. Thank you, Connie.